this is happening. We're starting. We're recording. We're live. We're beautiful. Your fans will be trickling in. Of course they are. Fabulous. We're late. That's my fault because I was chatty. There's a connection between me and Jen, and we were doing a lot of this. That's what happened. So I'm so sorry. We're going to take a second to just let the room populate and talk for a second. But I just want to say, if you are tuning in for a conversation between Chunky Monkey, which is a hilarious name for a writing group, can't wait to hear more about that. Chunky Monkey, fellow writers, Jenn De Leon and Alex Marzano-Lesnevich. I am so pumped that I'm getting that right every time. Yes, you are in the right place. And while the room is populating, I just want to talk about your beautiful background. So what I see is art. What I see are books. What I see is a pretty plant that I think is bamboo, but I don't actually know. Tell me about just like the vibe of the space where you are and what that air does for you.
Alex, please start. Oh my goodness.
Sure, I love this question. This green thing behind me is the sound of me typing. There's an artist, Christy Blizzard, out in Texas, and they and I were at McDowell together, and they surreptitiously taped me. And their art at the time, now they do lots of other things with their art, but their art at the time, their project was to turn sound into visual representations. And those are little Pantone papers, and they pasted them all together. It represents like 60 hours of work. And they mailed it to me physically as a surprise. And I hadn't known they had taped me typing, and specifically typing the fact of a body. And so they sent it, it arrived. I, of course, wept. And at the time, it was really important to them that I not frame it. It was like an organic part of the process, their own coffee spills and whatnot, and the making of the work were in it. And so it was important to them to have things sort of come into the piece. And I eventually just had to email them and say, I'm so sorry, but I have to frame it because I love it. I don't want to lose it. And it's falling apart. But even like, because for years it wasn't framed, there are even like pieces of my my late dog's fur in it that sort of made their way into the glue and stayed. And she was such a big part of me writing that book. So that is what is behind me. This is a tree that I bought mid-pandemic. It's something that starts with a D. The white star, Desidera, whatever it is, it can't be killed, thank God, because I'm terrible with plants. And I went to buy a Christmas tree in the pandemic and was feeling so pandemic-y that I also bought this. And was like, you know what? I need some trees in my house since we can't leave our house. Because I live in Maine, and all winter, you know, we couldn't really, there was nowhere to go.
You weren't going nowhere. You weren't going nowhere.
I was in this room, so I'm grateful I like this room so much, but I was in this room. Jen, what about you? That's a lovely bookshelf.
Oh, thank you. I always wanted, you know, a room of my own to write, and I love purple, so my dad painted the walls like lavender, and I have a painting there from my husband's grandfather from the Ukraine, and we have his paintings all over our house, and I love purple, so I have purple curtains, and then back there is a scarf from Guatemala. So I just feel like I have all my art, my books, my journals are under my desk, all my journals from when I was from 8th grade until now.
Wow.
So like, they're literally at the source, at the root. They're all like, I have tons. And I don't know, I feel like it's good energy to write with. I'm not even going to try to put them back. I'm going to put them right next to me.
Good. That is phenomenal. These are phenomenal. This is one of my favorite parts of these events, is to ask what's going on. And I think that these were just the most profound answers. And that visual representation of you typing is just.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Wow. That is
amazing.
That is the coolest. That is the coolest. All right.
No,
this
right?
is going to be amazing. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Lord.
I was emotionally stunned and moved. Yeah.
So y'all who are here, like clearly this is the beginning of a great conversation. Y'all are just in for such a treat. So I'm going to do my spiel and then get out of the way so that this can happen. Good evening. My name is Kara Wilson Cook. I am the events coordinator for the Silver Unicorn Bookstore in Acton, Massachusetts. It is such a pleasure to host two awesome authors in their beautiful spaces to talk about their two books. So Jenn De Leon has just released this beautiful new book, White Space, Essays on Culture, Race, and Writing. It is available at the Silver Unicorn Bookstore where there are signed copies. Hello, camera, please. There we go. There's an autograph in this one, y'all. And it is available at the Silver Unicorn and at silverunicornbooks.com. And Alex Marzano-Lesnevich is the author of The Fact of a Body. Yes. It is also a murder. I mean, it's also a memoir, but it also has murder in it. It's a murder memoir, which is the thing. So I just want to, yes, there we go. There's my camera focusing on this beautiful work. These two authors who are part of the Chunky Monkey writing group are going to talk about their work and talk about the craft. And if you're not already intrigued, y'all are in for a treat. I just have a couple things to say. The first is that you're already utilizing the chat. Awesome. If you have questions, Alex will be facilitating Q&A throughout this conversation. So please put those questions in the Q&A so that they can find them and they're not in the chat. But please do fill up the chat with good vibes because that's always fun, but just your questions, Q&A. I will be back at 7:55 to break up this really good conversation, which is going to make me sad. I can just already tell. And I think that's it. Alex, Jenn, this is already amazing. Thank you for choosing us. We're just so excited to have you today. And I know I have my notebook, so I'll be taking notes, and I hope all of y'all are going to do the same. Thanks again and again and again.
Thank you so much, Kara. And I love the Silver Unicorn Bookstore. Everybody should go there in Acton, Massachusetts. It's incredible.
Yeah, come see us, y'all. Come see us. All right, I'm disappearing. Have a great.
Fantastic. Jenn, I'm so thrilled to be doing this with you. Would you read to us from the book first? Could we start off that way?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for doing this. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to read from an essay called Happy New Year. I haven't read from this piece that much on this virtual tour, but I don't know. I've been thinking about this piece a little bit. So I'll read from it. And just to give you a little bit of context, this is in the third part of the essay collection. So it's after I came back from Guatemala from having lived there for part of the year. And I was feeling very lost and untethered. 1 second. My mom just asked me how to turn on the TV, but I don't know how to do that anyway, so I couldn't help her. Okay. This is called Happy New Year. My father gave us a ride. It was dark when we pulled into the retirement community made up of perfectly arranged condominiums that resembled the miniature houses of Monopoly. The snow was thick. He told us to call him when we were ready to be picked up. You sound like a shuttle van driver, I said. Shut the door, he said. Feliz Año Nuevo, I mouthed as he peeled his way past snow-frosted bushes that looked like vanilla cupcakes. Was it too late to go back? A part of me wanted to dive in the car and ditch my mom. We were here at a New Year's party, one where we would work. The truth is, the older I got, the more introverted I'd become. Maybe introverted was just a euphemism for depressed. Because I had come home from Guatemala earlier than planned, my apartment was still being sublet, so I had to stay with my parents for 2 months, on their living room sofa bed to be exact. I had also come home to friends' wedding engagements, bridal showers, and baby showers. Life suddenly felt like the props on the set had changed and everyone else was dressed in new costumes and they all knew their lines and I was standing in the shadows, wanting to run in a new direction, any direction, and yet feeling as if my feet were bolted to the floor. That was when I started seeing my new therapist, Caitlin. Caitlin was only a few years older than me and had silky brown hair down to her shoulders. During our first meeting, while I sat on the gray suede couch in her dimly lit office, the sound of water trickling over stones in the distance, she explained that we each lived our lives according to this book, or a story, a narrative. Immediately, I perked up. We have ideas and major storylines we feel we will carry out, live. There are, however, some past chapters that we need to close, and we can learn a lot from looking at the maybe unexpected storylines, or what we wouldn't look to first. I didn't totally know what she was saying, but it sounded good and warm and true. She also said we needed to be more forgiving and kind to ourselves. She said that I sounded like a motivated, bright woman and that I was going to be okay. I told her about my anxiety surrounding making decisions. Menus, she asked? Yep, that's fine. But then I told her about staples and how I stood in the folder section of the aisle for a good 20 minutes deciding which ones to get, manila, pastel, primary colors. I told her that in Spanish, the word hubiera lingered over my spirit like a dark cloud, should have. She said. She wrote on a yellow pad while I sank into the couch, hugging my Nalgene bottle to my core. Why do you think it was so difficult to choose which folders to buy? Had she ever been to Staples? Well, I said, I think it's connected to my fear of making wrong choices, my immense fear of regret. Maybe that's why the folders are such a big deal. I'm afraid of making the wrong choice, life choice, path. There are so many avenues I'm confronted with suddenly. I always thought I'd be living in Africa or something. I mean, not forever. Okay, I'd like to be married, have kids, a house, but later. And now all of a sudden, that's like here. I put my open palm right up to my nose. She winced, scribbled furiously. How's your sleep? Fine. It's so hard, she said. I think I'll stop there, just to give you a sense of the state of mind that I was in at this time when I came back from my trip.
Thank you, Jen. That was really beautiful. I'm gonna bump a question up from like later on in my plan and ask it now because it picks up on that beautiful excerpt, and I think it picks on something I admire so much about your writing. You write both fiction and nonfiction so beautifully. You've got, we're going to get to this later, but the two books you've launched in this global pandemic behind you, White Space and the YA novel, the gorgeous YA novel, Don't Ask Me Where I'm From. And as we just heard in that excerpt from White Space, you write with such vulnerability. You create this connection with the reader by sharing and then like sort of taking what you've shared and turning it over and looking at it and turning it over and looking at it and allowing the reader to see their own life in it. I'm curious how vulnerability shows up differently for you in fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Thank you so much. I mean, as you know, I do write fiction and nonfiction. I think it's so different, each one. I mean, people think sometimes that it's harder to be truthful in nonfiction or vulnerable, but because I've already opened that gate into that genre, once I start writing the piece, I sort of feel oddly more, I guess, free to write what I want to write, because I already know that it's all true. There's no kind of guessing, and there's work to be done and knots to untie and all of that. But from the jump, right? You're kind of like, well, this happened, and these are my feelings about it now. With fiction, I think people think, oh, you can hide behind fiction a little bit more, or you can say like, well, these characters aren't me. That didn't happen to me. But while that's true, I actually find that your stuff makes its way into your work regardless. What's genre? We're really talking about truth in the story.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned knots, because what I was going to start with is to tell you that my favorite line of the whole thing is, I like memories that are knots. Right. And that there are so many lines I love, but that like stopped me when I read it, because it is such a memoirist line or a personal essayist line to prefer the complicated tangles, right? Complicated memories. And I'm curious, you worked on this book for so many years. You and I used to meet many, many years ago with Grace Tallison, who's also a member of our writing group, the Chunky Monkeys, but this predates the Chunky Monkeys. The three of us would meet at this table in Porter Square, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. And you shared some of the earliest drafts of some of these essays. And I'm so curious how your understanding of what you were untangling in those knots changed over the course of working on this book, or how, like, walking through those gates you just mentioned, how that changed in the course of working on the book.
Yeah. I mean, I think working with you and with Grace gave me courage. It gave me permission to kind of write some hard truths, because we were in this kind of playgroup together, with our own material, and we would gather at the Sandbox, which was the round table at the back of Porter Square Books, and we would just kind of play and tinker and hold things up to the light, and what do you think, and I think that was key in helping me to continue with these pieces, because at the time I was in an MFA program for fiction. So I felt like I was cheating on fiction by meeting up with you all, in the bookstore and working on essays. But clearly I had this need to kind of grapple with this material and figure out what I wanted to say. I did try writing a couple of these pieces as short stories, but they just felt very, I don't know, kind of plasticky. Like they wanted to be creative nonfiction. And I love both forms so much. I know you do too. Creative nonfiction is just memoir. There's nothing like it. There's a feeling of satisfaction I get after I write an essay that is very different from finishing a chapter or even a whole novel. I can't describe it. I should probably try. Hey, maybe that's an essay, right?
Well, so many of the essays in this book kind of concern the act of writing or of teaching, and this focus on language, but also the love that you have for language comes through. There's this moment where you make sure that the first words your oldest son, Mateo, hears are in Spanish. And I love that. I love the way you even in the excerpt you just read, you referenced like the major storylines in life, the chapters we can close. There's this preoccupation of putting the world into words. And I'm curious how that emerged in the writing of the pieces, whether it was something you're conscious of or whether it showed up when you were stitching them together.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I worked on these essays over the course of 10 years, and I didn't set out to write an essay collection. So I wasn't writing with an agenda or with kind of thoughts of what rhyming action do I want among the essays? What tropes do I want to see? What motifs or symbols do I want to sprinkle throughout? It was not like that at all. It was only after in editing that I even considered that. But what happened is that these themes naturally popped up because I was grappling with them at different points in my time, in my life, and writing was always one of those threads or those through lines. It takes a long time to become a writer. I mean, I still feel like I'm becoming a writer. So naturally, writing, I think, is going to be a clothesline or a storyline through these pieces.
I told my undergrads yesterday when we were having our last class, I told them about White Space, and I told them about this event tonight, and I told them that what I think is true, that the oldest essay in the book is one you wrote when you were 19 in college.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. Which they found, like, you could see their faces light up and you could see them start to dream a little more, just like, maybe we can do that too. And I wonder if you could talk about that process of taking those, an essay written when you were 19 and taking, when's the most recent essay written?
From like 3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So that's a span. Can you talk about that process of kind of laying them out and seeing your life unspool on the pages?
Yeah, it's so weird, because part of me is like, oh, I don't want to include that piece in there because I wrote maybe differently than I did. But that's part of the overall story too. I don't want to, I guess it's kind of like to make a connection to school pictures. I know, follow me here, stay with me. Okay. It's like random Gen land. Okay. So, like when people have their kids take school pictures or even author photos, there's this kind of like, oh, I know, I'm going to wear a ball gown, or I'm going to get my makeup done professionally, or I'm going to XYZ, or like kids, they're going to be spotless and have, nothing, no scrape on their knee, no like ketchup on their face. And it's like, I get it. You want to, it's an old fashioned kind of tradition, like you dress up to take a photograph. But some of the best pictures are ones that are natural and a little raw and messy. And I think about essays in that way too. I mean, you want them to be readable and you want to give your best work, but that young voice, that more naive kind of soul was coming through in those earlier pieces in a way that is different if I were to write them now, So I guess because white space is about growing into becoming the person that fills up white space on the page, it only felt natural to keep those genuine pieces. But yeah, tell your students, 19, keep whatever they write.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. And let's pick up that idea of space. In the very first essay, Mapping Yolanda, you evoke the blank space of a threatened future. Right? If you don't take care of yourself then, and you actually leave the space blank on the page, which I love. And in the titular essay, The White Space, which I remember you bringing to the Chunky Monkeys, and we all loved it. And I was thrilling to see it in this book. You adopt like a resume format to talk about your father, and the objective is blank with describe career objective left there, and email account and email address forthcoming. I love that email account is included in that. So like you're holding a lot of spaces in this book, and many of the spaces are unimagined or unimaginable, but you're writing your way into them. And you even end the book with an evocation of space. How did your thinking about space? You also inhabit lots of different physical spaces in the book. How did your thinking about space kind of change as you were writing these essays? How much was that on your mind? I guess that conscious question again, but I'm so curious how you related to it.
Yeah, that's an important question in terms of, I guess, current events and just what it means to me today to feel and be a writer of color in this world. It's very much connected to taking up space and being unapologetic about it and feeling like my stories matter and there is a place for them on the shelf and all of that. I mean, on the best days, I feel empowered and like, yes, I will write 16 books, and like, I will do all the things. And then on other days, I'm like, does anybody really care about like if I write another essay? It's like the pendulum swings both ways constantly. But I think space was prevalent throughout these pieces because I was constantly thinking about, do I deserve to be in this space? Like, how do I get to be a writer when so many of my family members work blue collar jobs? And, my parents are immigrants. They came to this country, really wanted me to be a lawyer or a doctor. And I'm writing like short stories, it just felt like that guilt. So how do I take up space in that way? But then also this, just the mere space, the mere fact of like, I was going to say fact of a body, fact of a story, the fact of a story, it's really important to understand that we deserve to have our stories that are traditionally marginalized really moved to the center and to be celebrated and validated. So I think that's probably why space was on my mind a lot, because I was like obsessed with it. And even the spaces, being the only person of color or the first writer, the first person to go to college in my family, the first professor, all of these experiences really made me reflect on like the space that I was in and what does it mean to be the only person of color or the first, and so I could write a whole other collection of essays. This is like,
please do, please do. Yeah. Please do. And this leads so perfectly to Grace's question in the chat. Grace writes, we grew up without many books by authors of color. etc. What has it meant to you as a mother, daughter, teacher to see your books on a shelf? And what would it have meant to you as a younger person to see books by someone like you on school curriculums, library shelves, and so on?
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Grace, for that. I mean, it's wild to think about the fact that I did not read my first book by a Latina author until I was a freshman in college. And that was The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. And I remember exactly where I was when I read that book. I was at Connecticut College in the library, sitting on this like cushy chair, and I couldn't believe that I was seeing words in Spanish and that I was reading about characters that could have been in my family. And it was very powerful, that shock of recognition, all of that, windows, mirrors. But to think about the fact that white space and Don't Ask Me Where I'm From and Wise Latinas, are on bookshelves and are in schools, and students are picking them for summer reading books and just connecting with students. It's incredible. I almost can't believe, I keep thinking like I'm going to wake up and be like, oh man, that would have been cool. but it's like it's actually happening. I mean, that's the greatest, hands down, that's the greatest feeling, is when say a young Latina will email me or say something like, I don't really like books and everything, but I like yours. Yes, because then it's the bridge to the next book and the next one, and then maybe they'll write their stories. So it makes me very happy.
It strikes me that you occupy this role as like a teacher of writing, and as a writer, and as a witnesser, and as a translator of action into language, not just on the page, but in so many areas of your life. And that the literary work you do is I think one thing we feel reading it is like it's so emblematic of you. It's so you're bringing your full self to it, which also sounds maybe a little scary and vulnerable to have out in the world. Yes,
Yeah.
could you tell us about that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's just, I meant it. Like when we started this Zoom, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad we're friends, because I feel like I can relax, and this is super enjoyable. All the events are enjoyable, but it's different when I feel this kind of charge, like I'm there to really connect with the students, but I'm also aware of maybe administrators in the room and thinking like, who is this person? And then the imposter syndrome kicks in for me big time. And then I'm aware of the teachers and I feel for them. I can't believe the year that they've had. And I've been a teacher. I totally like get being in that space. I think about the young students who are being bullied, who are just like sending me DMs on Instagram. I mean, it's a lot. It's very emotional. It's very emotional. And to read excerpts and share stories about some really vulnerable times in my life, it's a little bizarre. I mean, this, it's like you're out in the world, you're being exposed, but at the same time, that's exactly what I hope for. So it's kind of a weird conundrum, but I was thinking about, the Chunky Monkeys, like our writing group, and how one of the many gazillion ways we support each other is to help each other prep for book tours even, and the tough questions that we'll get. And by watching you and Grace and Celeste and like really Calvin, like everybody getting these questions for nonfiction, it makes me feel like, okay, they did it. They're still alive. Like, all right, I'm going to do it too. And it just, I don't know. I feel like I'm able to like charge my batteries or something from your energy sources. I don't know.
I love that. I love that. I think we all constantly charge our batteries from each other's energy sources. One thing that hadn't occurred to me until you just referenced imposter syndrome, which of course for me is like, oh my God, she has 3 books out and she's still referencing imposter syndrome. How is that possible? Is that, you have this evocation of the writer's space in white space, where you're thinking about the study of in the house of a famous writer, who, and I remember when you brought that essay to Chunks, and I just want to say, I don't have a question about this quite, but I just want to say that, that person wrote 1 book, but you, Jen, you now have 3 out in the world. So imposter syndrome begun.
Oh man.
So in terms of writing, let's go back to the title, White Space. When did that title come into play? It's such the perfect title for the book. It means so many different things. I love the cover, which I know was a sort of a process.
Yeah.
When did that cover come in? When did the title come into play, and did it change the way you thought about the essays in the book or shaping the book?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact moment. I remember that I definitely had other titles. What other titles did I have? And I feel like Sonia in our writing group, Sonia Larson, helped me. And she said, do like Facebook and cut the. I guess it used to be the Facebook before Mark Zuckerberg was like, no, it's just going to be Facebook. So because I had the white space, because that's the one of the essays that I published that that won the Michael Steinberg Prize for fourth genre, that really made me feel like, wait, I can do this, and so I thought, oh, I'll call it the white space, but Sonia was like, no, I think you should drop the. So anyway, but white space definitely felt like a cohesive kind of container for the pieces here. And the middle essays are about going to Guatemala. A lot of them take place in Guatemala. And part of why I wanted to do that is because when I helped my father write his first resume, I was really reflecting on the white space of the page on his resume, and how there was so much in that white space that I wanted to know about and fill. And that's why I moved to Guatemala. I bought a one-way ticket. I quit my job. I mean, I used savings. My parents were like, oh my God, this is our worst nightmare, but I felt like I had to do it. There was no question. And so I think white space works in that way too for the title. But the double entendre, I guess there are many meanings, but places like you had mentioned McDowell, and we've both been to Bread Loaf and AWP, and there are just a lot of the writing spaces and communities. I think the needle is moving slowly. It's getting better, where they're more inclusive of marginalized communities that we both belong to, but they're predominantly white male spaces. And it's really hard to see myself and feel empowered in these spaces. Like I think getting a little better, but it can be the smallest thing that kind of sends me back into like, do I deserve to be here? Do these stories matter? Etc.
You structured the book so beautifully with before, and then there's a large section, Guatemala, which isn't the longest section of the book in terms of page count, but does have the most essays in it. Mm-hmm. And then after, positioning Guatemala as both the body of the book, but also this pivotal turning point that literally just structures things into before and after. Mm-hmm. I wonder if what role that played in your stepping forward to write the book, but also just where that choice came from and how that emerged and how you think about it.
Right. I mean, think about all the essays you've written or stories you've collected in the last 10 years, and then you put them together. That doesn't make a manuscript. It makes a bundle of pages, that are stories you've written or experienced in the last 10 years. So how do you go from that to a manuscript to a book? For me, I had to think about what pieces didn't belong. And then I had to think about what pieces needed to complement the ones that were there. And for the longest time, I had no idea how to structure them. I thought, I have a bunch of essays, but I'm not sure that this equates to a manuscript. In the same way, I have a bunch of journals from my childhood, from adolescence. That doesn't mean I can randomly pick one and it's a book, right? We have to shape them and really contour them. And so I played with different ideas and then journaled about the essay collection before it was an essay collection, just kind of journaling like, what am I trying to say? What is this about? What's holding this together? What could this be as a unit? And it dawned on me that a major through line was Guatemala. And I had lots of stories from my trip in Guatemala, but I hadn't typed them out. They weren't like in Microsoft Word, they were in my journal still. So I had to, once I discovered I want this to be the arc, Guatemala, then I went into my journals and kind of pinched and mined and folded pages over and had a lot of work to do. So that kind of sucked, I'm not gonna lie, because I wish that I could have had my essay collection be just all the essays I wrote between 2007 and 2017. But it's never easy. It's like, just when you think you're done, it's like, oh no, you're not.
Your parents were, you said they had their concerns about you sort of up and moving to Guatemala, that this was like not what they wanted to see happen. But at the same time, now you have this book with this body and structure of Guatemala. How has that been for them? Because they're in the book.
Oh yeah, they're in the book. Yeah, I mean, they're proud. They're totally proud. I think it's complicated, you know, when we write memoirs, you know, where you're writing about real people. And of course, when there are moments where my mom is shining and she's like the mother of the year, she's like, I love this book. But when there are moments where I'm writing about, you know, how we have a complicated relationship and how, you know, there are moments where I reflect on how my father left our family when I was 14, you know, in those moments, she's not exactly holding up the book, you know. So I think she's having her own experience with the publication, as is my father, as am I. But I think we all understand kind of tacitly that it's just, it is, you know, like it is.
And you write so beautifully about that moment with your father, where you write that he was sort of choosing between a family and a country for a minute, because he comes back.
He comes back, yeah.
Yeah, he comes back, and you let us know that later on you write a novel trying almost like with a character based on him, almost trying to understand. It feels like trying to understand him.
Yep.
So we watch Jenn in the course of these essays work her way through the events and occasions of her life. I think in memoir we would often call that grappling, but I gotta say, it feels like holding. It feels like in your hands, it feels like a gentler honoring and holding than straight up grappling. That idea again that you like memories that are knots, like love is tangled and you're thinking about those tangled. So I'm not sure what question I'm trying to ask, because I didn't plan to ask that. It was just like, I love the way you do that. And Dora is your mother is so supportive so often. Yeah. It's really beautiful to see. You write bringing so much of yourself. And then I guess that makes my next question what it's like then to say goodbye to a project that has so much of you in it, and turn to the next books, because you are incredibly prolific. You've got 2 books coming down the pipeline next. You've got 2 books launched during the pandemic, which we're going to get to in a second, what that's like, and then 2 books coming down the pipeline next. So what's it like to say goodbye to a book that holds so much of you?
Yeah. Oh man, I'm loving these questions. They're like so artistic and stylistic and beautiful. I mean, what's it like to say goodbye to your book? I mean, it is a kind of a release, like a little bit of a release. Like, you know, you put the flower in the pond and you watch it go away. Like, all right, okay, I'm feeling that. I mean, there's so many emotions, right? But one is that I wanted the book to, and this is very true, and at my core, I think I'll be saying this about this book and hopefully future books I write, you know, but this one in particular, I really wanted to be a counter narrative, you know, to so much of the stories about Central American people that are in the media. And it's important to document our stories and to have them available as testimonies, or like you mentioned before, to be as witnesses, and write these pieces so that they exist. That's what Gloria Anzaldúa in her famous book, Borderlands, like writes about this idea, and how and writing is a form of activism in that way. And so that's very important, the idea of counter narratives. But also, while there are many kind of dark topics and themes in the book, there are moments of humor too, and just kind of moments of realness. And I think it's important to understand that writers of color, especially, we aren't, only tied to our stories of trauma. Like, we should also be able to write our stories of joy. And for me, my mother is a great source of joy. It's complicated, but there is a lot of joy there too, And yes, my father, I think a lot of people can't fathom, people, meaning the white reader, might say, what? How can a man from Guatemala want to go back to Guatemala? How is that even, it doesn't cross their mind. And he wants nothing more than to go back to Guatemala. So it was important for me to have that different perspective in there. So letting go of this means I can work on the next project. It also feels kind of, I think a lot of authors have this path where they write stories and then a novel, an essay collection, and then a memoir. So it feels like that's more of a possibility, like it's in the air. And so that's exciting. That's really exciting.
That's thrilling for us, all of us who get to read the next things you write. You write in so many different genres. I'm going to go to the chat for this next one. Austin asks in the chat, when you spoke about meeting and workshopping with me and Grace in Porter Square, you talked about it as a playgroup meeting at the Sandbox, which, yeah, I totally loved. So as you write in all these different genres, can you talk about the role the act of play plays in your process?
Yeah, nice. Yep. I mean, in our writing group, we bring chunks. That's how we got the name Chunky Monkeys, right? We don't put that pressure on ourselves of being like, I'm bringing a chapter of my novel. It's like, I'm just going to bring a chunk and see what you guys think about it. And that's just way more playful, I think, and that way, when you get feedback or we have a conversation about the piece, it feels more open rather than closed. And I think in some traditional workshops, it's the latter, and so that's kind of cool. I would say that. I mean, what do you think?
Oh, I love that. I mean, I love that answer. I do think there's a deep sense of play about it, a deep sense of lightning about it. We make t-shirts, we tell jokes, we make ridiculous t-shirts. And I love that about us. I love how much space we make for trying things out. Yeah. And how much we kind of hold each other up. And I often feel like the group starts to hold the knowledge that you can do the project before you even necessarily totally know you can do the project. Totally. And the group holds it for you when the imposter syndrome is winning, or when you can't, Yes.
Yeah. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I feel like that too. Like, it's like, I keep waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder, but you're not. Yeah. It's like, you're just sort of like, yeah, you're doing this. It makes it feel more real, more possible. And, the other thing too, is that, like, for instance, anytime somebody posts something, like when you announced your latest book, which is incredible and everybody should learn about it, right? Both and neither. I think for lots of people, the first time they're learning about it, it's on their news feed or it's on Twitter or whatever. And they're like, man, Alex is just slaying, they are killing it. Right. And they're like, oh my God, what, okay, I gotta like, right. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. Like, and the thing is that I get the front row seat to your process, and the curtain is pulled back in the sense that I see how over a year ago you brought to our workshop an idea. I think it was like a sentence, and then it was like a page, and then 6 pages, and then some thinking about the proposal. I mean, it was really like your patience is admirable, because you really took your time, and it's just so it's paying off like on so many levels, right? But I think what happens is someone just sees that post and think you did it the night before or even the summer before or whatever, but really it's like a multi-year project. And I think that's important. um, yeah, people think I published, no, I did publish 2 books in the pandemic, but people confuse that with writing 2 books in the pandemic. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. I didn't write this book in the pandemic. I wrote this book over the last 10 years. It just happened that the publication date was, 6 months after Don't Ask Me Where I'm From.
You did sell 2 more books in the pandemic, though. So like, you did. Yeah, I mean, Jen, you are incredibly prolific, and you hold so much, like so many ideas. You're always like, I think a characteristic of that I always think of with your work is like you have so many incredibly awesome ideas, and you make them into things. You make them into books. And I do want to go back to the chunks for a second before I continue on with the further books, just because in the chat there's the question of what brought our writing group together.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Remember, where did we used to go? What's that place in downtown Boston? The writing, was it a loft? It was like a loft, like you could rent a desk or something.
The writer's room?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember we were both part of that. And I remember walking on the sidewalk, leaving with my backpack, my laptop, and then I'd see you on the opposite sidewalk, like going towards it. And we would just give like the writer nod. Yeah, it was like,
yeah.
So it's been years that we've been doing the work. And I think what happened, I love deadlines that structure gives, classes, routine. I thrive off of that. I think I've always loved school, and not that workshop is like school, but I like having that accountability. And what happened is I was taking so many classes at Grub Street. I mean, it's like I was ODing on classes, and my husband was like,
well, you met at Grub Street.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. He was like, "Oh my God, like you're just like going nuts." And I'm like, "It's because I need this." And he's like, "Okay." So at that time, we had just come back from Guatemala, and I was pregnant. I think it were so many things where I was like, I can't take another class, but I really want a writing group. And so I had this idea to reach out to other instructors at Grub Street. I think you had just moved to Pennsylvania. And actually, I remember when you came back, everybody was like, yes. And I'm like, oh my God, we need to ask Alex. And then Chip said, well, we can ask Alex, but they're really busy. And I just don't know, if this is going to happen. And when you said, yes, I want to join this group, we were like,
That's so kind, because when I got the email from Adam asking me to join the group, I remember the imposter syndrome of that moment. I was terrified. I was like, yes. And also, oh no, they're going to find out I'm an imposter. But one of the things I love about the group is that we've now, I joined 7 years ago. I think the group has been going for like nine. Yeah. And I think people look at the group and they think that everyone has always published this much and whatnot, but no, when we got together, like that was not the case.
Yeah.
And so it slowly grew over time and over time and over time and over time, to coming up to this point where now, yes, you have indeed launched 2 books in the pandemic. How's that been? How's it launching the second book, still having a global pandemic that thankfully seems, at least in the US, like it's starting to calm down? But yeah, any words of wisdom for other writers who are launching books in the pandemic,
I find that, yes, it's a ton of work and energy and vulnerability, but it also feeds me too. So I think figuring out what part of promoting a book feeds you is critical. Like, for instance, writing blog posts or op-eds, it's nice, but it's very time consuming for me. It gives me a ton of anxiety and I freak out and I just second guess myself and I spend way too long on it. Whereas doing events, I love talking with people. I love connecting with readers. I just have always, I don't know, I guess valued conversation, and it fills me up. Like I leave recharged. So, but if you're a total introvert and you're like, I can't stand talking, I don't want people looking at me, I don't want to talk to people, then probably that's going to give you the anxiety that like writing op-eds does for me, you know? So it's just figuring out what it is. And I would say that what's been interesting, not so much challenging, but I'm just noticing how different audiences require different entry points or kind of railings into the material, you know, and so it can be working that way. You can't just say like, I'm going to do a book talk, I'm going to do an author visit. You really have to consider the community, the readers, who's in the audience, what do you want people to take away, what time of day is it, what books have they read, is your book the first book by a person of color they've ever read, you know? So there's a lot that goes into it. And I think people might not always realize that. They're like, so I counted the events that I did from May 15th, 2020
wow.
to May 15th, 2021. That's my birthday. And I said, let me just see. I think I've done like 50. So then I look closer and then I look closer. And then as I'm driving, like yesterday, I was like, oh, I forgot about that. American University, like all these random. So I finally have a document and I have 83 events.
Oh my God. Jen.
I know.
Prolific and productive.
So that's what it's like
yeah.
to launch 2 books in a pandemic.
Amazing.
Real life,
Amazing.
I don't think I could do 83 in real life, but on the computer, yeah.
That is so incredibly impressive. All right. Well, before we run out of time, because you have 2 more books coming down the pipeline already, not to mention the memoir that clearly you are next going to write. I think you referenced it.
You got to help me.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Which now I'm trying to do the math on how many events this is going to be for those 2 books, 160. So can you tell us about these books? Like which one's next and what's coming down the pipeline after that?
Yeah. So, thank you. So the next 2 books are YA novels, and the next one is called Maya, and it will be published in summer 2022. So yeah, a year.
So soon. That's awesome.
Yeah. And this tells the story of a 16-year-old teenager in Guatemala City who is an aspiring fashion designer. And she and her friend and her mother get caught up in some trouble with the maras, which are the gangs in Guatemala. And they have to flee for the Mexico-US border in the dead of night. And the next novel is Untitled, but it's set in Africa. And it tells the story of a teen girl from New England who goes on a service learning project to help build a medical clinic in an unnamed country in Africa. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to name the country specifically. Anyway, lots of choices to make, but it's I'm fascinated by the idea of service trips and, you know, like the Peace Corps and like all these kinds of programs where you get to drop in and quote unquote save the day or save people and put something on your college resume and then fly back out, and how that parallels with this particular character's coming of age story. So you'll be seeing pages of that in the chunks sometime.
Well, and I've seen Maya, who's an amazing character, just an amazing, compelling character. So
thank you, Alex.
More. Thank you, Jen.
Alex, you are such a gracious and incredible just interviewer and host. This has just been such an incredible chat. And I feel like you got so many just wonderful and deep and rich answers out of Jen. So I just have to say thank you.
Thank
that
you
was
for having
awesome.
us. Jen, this is all Jen. Jen has so much to say. I feel like we're so lucky to get to hear from her.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just such a testament to the relationship that you both have, just as friends in general and friends in craft, that we were able to receive. I'm going to say receive. Just these incredible answers. I've learned a lot and I've absorbed a lot. I'm just so in awe and delighted. And I'm so jealous. Just as a writer who's not a member of the Chunks, that I don't get to see some cool pages about, Maya or any of your future characters. And I bet you if there's any other writers who are here in the participants panel, we're just all like, what? Alex gets to see, and we just gonna have to wait till 2022? Not cool. Not cool. So I guess what I'm saying, Jen, is that you're gonna have to come see us, and when you publish in next summer, so we can find out who Maya is and read about her journey and hear even more about this process.
Oh, thank you, Kara. Seriously, this is incredible. And maybe when we do that event, it'll be in person.
Please,
Yes.
Jesus, yes.
Yes.
We will have a big old party just for you. I think that would be awesome. And Alex, I look forward to reading your next great work, which I feel like there was an allusion to it, and then you've made an announcement, and then I'm not gonna lie, I was off camera, so I went looking at your website to see if I could find something, and then I couldn't find something. So are you allowed to tell us like what's
I'm
what's going
absolutely
on?
allowed. Hopefully it'll be out either late 2023 or early 2024 from Doubleday. It's called Both and Neither. It is a mix of memoir, cultural history. Well, let me rephrase. It is a sort of a gender crossing, genre crossing mix of history, cultural history, trans reimaginings, like characters from the past who were real, characters from the archives actually come to life and like join me on my road trip, and international road trip about life beyond the gender binary. It's basically, look, people tend to think that the gender binary is really old, but it's actually not. It's really, it's pretty new. And so it's kind of writing my way into the community that I need to be sort of taken out back from history, and sort of reminded that this community does and has always existed. And because the roots of genre and gender are the same in French, it really struck me that a transgender book had to be transgenre. So it's gonna be a book. But I'm supposed to do that road trip, and then a little thing called a global pandemic happened. So it's going to take a bit longer to get the book out, but late 2023, early 2024.
Yo.
Yep.
Yes. Yes, please. Yes, and yes, please.
Yeah.
And thank you. Just like thank you in advance, and see you in 2023 or whenever.
I would love it. Amazing.
Yes. All right. I had to break this up, and now I have to say goodbye, and that hurts my feelings. I'm just gonna first of all, I'm just gonna say thank you to the both of you. This has been everything. I've been looking forward to this for months. We booked this months ago, and I've been looking forward to it, and it lived up to the hype in my head. Thank you. Awesome. So our gracious host, Alex, see, because I was reading, that's what happened. Alex Marzano-Lesnevich is the writer of this beautiful book, which is on the shelves. We ain't got no book plates. Could you send us some book plates?
I can send you book plates.
Hey, so
yeah.
If you want a signed copy with book plates of The Fact of a Body, you got to come to the Silver Unicorn Bookstore or order from silverunicornbooks.com. I'm going to let my camera focus on that. Oh yeah, because it's so pretty. So make a note of that at silverunicornbooks.com and put it in the comment section when you check out that you'd like a book plate for this one. But you can also just come to the store and pick it up. And we have copies, beautiful signed copies of White Space, not the White Space. That's what the original was. It's actually called White Space. And this is available at silverunicornbooks.com. And if you would like a customized signed copy, it would seem that Jen has to come visit us very soon. So you can also write in your order at silverunicornbooks.com that you would like a custom signed copy. Thank you so much for coming in and doing that first, Jen. That is phenomenal. And if you are listening to this from or viewing this from really far away, we just ask that you go and pick up these books at an independent bookstore near you. This has been phenomenal. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Come back really soon and tell all of the members of the Chunks that we would like to see y'all and we want to celebrate your books. So come back and see us, yeah?
In your books, Kyra. Yeah.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah, you got to put it out in the air.
Yep.
Trying.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you to the entire Grub Street community for being so good to writers. And I know, Jen, you're on the board, and I am personally so grateful to Grub Street for all the support. So it's everything. So the panty's not over. All y'all stay safe out there, and we will see you again soon. All right.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Night. Thank you.